Welcome to the Lowe Post podcast early on a Thursday morning. Jeff Van Gundy, probably fresh from the clubs in South Beach, didn't even go to sleep, just came right on the pod. How are you, sir?
Good. Little tired, you know. The clubs were hopping last night.
Who goes harder, you, Breen, or Mark Jackson? Who's got the best dance moves at the club? You know, you guys, you skip the lines. There's no line for you.
I'm gonna say, if hard means being in bed 30 minutes after the game, then I go the hardest. Yeah.
So last night, a championship level performance by the Denver Nuggets. Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic dueling 30, 10, and 10 triple doubles, 66 combined points on 24 of 43 shooting, 14 of 16 from the foul line. If I did my math right, so that's 66 out of 109 points. 6 of Jokic's 10 assists went to non-Murray players. 4 of Murray's 10 assists went to non-Jokic players, I think, if I'm doing my math right. That's basically two guys just by themselves with the brilliance of their two-man game, with the brilliance of their individual games, combined with a clean defensive performance by Denver, an incredible rim defensive performance by Denver. The Heat shot 35% at the rim and 43%, I think, on twos. Their best defensive performance of the game. After kind of an arduous 72 hours for them, with Michael Malone calling out their effort, with a reportedly sort of, feisty film session with some comments that I think were clearly directed a little bit at Michael Porter Jr.'s defense from game 2. Denver came out in a hostile environment and pretty much laid the smackdown on the Heat. What stood out to you, Coach? What was your just big picture takeaway?
I thought Murray's aggression offensively right from the start. I think because he was so active and aggressive and a fit and so good, the Heat had to try to start blitzing him. And I thought that impacted him a couple times. I thought they did some really good things. But anytime Denver gets 2 on the ball, it's such a win for them, because then the ball finds Jokic in a 4-on-3 situation, and ultimately he's going to make the right play. And I thought, Christian Brown did a tremendous job cutting, finding his way to layups as the defense extended. So I thought Murray's aggression, Jokic's basically normal brilliance. And then, as you said, I thought the defense was much more alert, far fewer technical mistakes.
Yeah, there were maybe just a couple of breakdowns, and Miami didn't capitalize as readily as they did in game 2. I think there are probably more Denver defensive breakdowns in the first 5 minutes of game 2 than there were in the entirety of game 3. And by breakdowns, I just mean just flat out mistakes. Sometimes a team is going to grind you into a miscommunication where two guys are playing kind of honestly good defense. You've put them in kind of a chaos situation. I'm talking breakdowns. You just said normal brilliant for Jokic, and I know people know the numbers, but it's only 3 games in. Nobody's won anything yet. 33 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, 59% shooting, 63%, I think, on twos. 3 games in, he's on pace for one of the greatest finals ever. But they don't give you any trophies for 3 games in. But just watching him up close last night, watching the two-man game up close last night, as just sort of the art of it and the skill of it, were there plays that stood out to you? Was there something that stood out to you?
I would love a chart on how many times his 2-point shots hit the rim first and fall in versus roll out. Some people just have a naturally soft shot. Others have a naturally hard shot. His invariably, even when that first hit of the rim doesn't seem like there's an angle for it to roll in, it just finds its way in. So that's one thing that stands out to me, just the exquisite touch. And then I think I just love every interview. I just love how he gives to his teammates. the credit, particularly Murray, always trying to build him up as far as being their best player. And then I think what stood out to me last night is after the game, he saw a former teammate in Monte Morris, and his just natural reaction to seeing a teammate who used to play with them, instead of celebrating his own greatness, he looked like he really enjoyed the chance interaction with someone he once played with. And I thought that was exactly what you would hope to see from anybody who plays a team sport.
I didn't see that. Was that caught on television? As soon as the game was over, I started doing rewatching parts of it, and I didn't see that. That's cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. I mean, that's everybody tells you what you can get out of being a part of a team, but the camaraderie, even through defeat, sometimes there's nothing that replicates it. It was just extremely cool to see, Morris and him exchange, like real happiness to see one another.
Well, I mean, look, every time a team does something serious, and again, the Nuggets have won what, 14 playoff games now, 14-4. So that's serious. Even if they don't end up finishing the job, that's still serious. There are guys who are no longer on the team who were an important part of their journey there. And Monte Morris is one of those guys, not just for what they traded him for. They're starting two guard KCP, who has not had a great series so far, a great last two games anyway. But for the role they played in all the playoff experience that Denver got on the way here. And there's a lot, we could go through lots of guys, coaches, front office people, Tim Connolly, who played a role. So I think that's part of the reason why it's cool. Cause I'm sure that Jokic, it's not just, hey buddy, I know you. It's, you were a big part of what is going on right here.
Yeah. And I think Jokic has a way about him that draws people to him. Like there's some stars that other players tolerate because they know of their greatness and their impact on winning. Jokic, to me, seems like the kind of guy, because of how he plays the game and how he gives credit to others, that people gravitate to and really enjoy being around. And I'll tell you, I think he is somebody, and I think the ratings show that through two games. I'm not sure what it was last night, but where people were worried that people would not tune in, I think once you see Jokic, you want to tune in more.
I would agree. And I want to shout out Murray too, because, the shot making, I think gets a lot of the attention, and he makes 4 or 5 just demoralizing. You've done a pretty good job, and he just pivots and spins and fades away, and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do? And he has a knack for doing that in the very few minutes where Jokic is off the floor. And last night they played 45 and 44 minutes. They played 40 minutes together last night. 40 minutes, a duo, plus 14 in those minutes. I just think because Jokic is such an otherworldly, once in a lifetime superstar and like a totally rare archetype, not even an archetype, just a totally rare player, he gets most of the adulation for their two-man game. I thought last night, first of all, they ran 32 pick and rolls together last night, according to Second Spectrum. That's their most in any game this season, tied for their most in any game this season. His artistry in making that sing, I think, doesn't quite get enough attention. And so you mentioned the blitzing last night. And yeah, that got him a couple times. He had that lollipop turnover on the sideline right at the beginning of the third quarter, I think. But there were a couple other times where he strung it out to the side, got around Bam, who was really trying to press him outside. One of them, Bruce Brown, got a 3. I think he missed. Another one, Aaron Gordon got a dunk because he drew a third defender. He got around both the first two, drew a third one, dumped it to Aaron Gordon. But just like the little hesitations and then accelerations that draw Bam that extra step further and get Jokic that extra step further in the paint. There was a floater in the first half where Jokic caught the ball like 14 feet from the rim and had so much space. He was like, oh, I could just kind of walk this into an 8-footer and float it in. And that, a lot of that is Murray just bobbing and weaving. And cracking open little windows of space that wouldn't be there otherwise. Just I thought he did have 7 turnovers, and credit Miami's pressure defense for that, but I thought his kind of guile was on display last night.
I just love the way he started the game. He came off game 2 where I thought he was good. Like, you look at the numbers, you watch the game, he was good. But it was a different mindset to attack early and to not just score. Like, to me, the most impressive plays weren't even his buckets. To me, he had 2 rebounding sequences where he beat people to the ball. And to me, that shows, again, you can have all the speeches in the world, but when your best players do the hard things and they're willing to make contact plays, and you're going to get like bumped and bruised like he did last night, grabbing his hand, got stepped on, awkward fall, but those plays are inspiring. And, to me, he set a great tone last night. Obviously, the ball went in. Obviously, he contorted the defense, making them blitz him. But then I just thought the effort plays and the Tony set was really special. He should be really proud of himself.
It was a serious performance by the Nuggets and in a serious game. And you and I were texting before the game about, we had these TV segments yesterday about who needs the game most, Miami or Denver. And you and I were kind of like, it's game 3 of the NBA Finals. Everyone needs this one. And both teams came out with a level of urgency requisite to the moment. And so here's where we are through 3 games. Denver is plus 23 for the series. And I think the stat that is maybe the stat of the series, their offensive rating through 3 games, 117.6 points per 100 possessions. That would have ranked 2nd in the regular season behind only the Kings by easily over 3rd. So a very good offensive rating. To do that in 2023 with 24 made threes in 3 games, shooting 32% from 3 in those 3 games, and have an offensive rating that high is unusual. It's a credit to low turnovers, high offensive rebounds, good number of free throws, and great 2-point calculated cutting. Christian Brown's cutting against the zone. Just it for people who have been longing for, I don't want to watch teams just shoot 53s a game and it's a make or miss league. And if Boston shoots 40%, they win. And if they shoot 38%, they lose. 118 offensive rating on a piddling number of threes is, I looked at the numbers. I'm like, man, they only have 24 threes. I mean, that is in its way, it's entertaining to watch.
Oh, I think variety is absolutely enjoyable to watch. It's very hard to go on the road, turn the ball over so much more than your opponent. I think they make 6 less threes than their opponent, than Miami last night. I think they only made 5.
5 of 18 from 3, 11 of 35. And for the series, Miami has 17 more threes on 36 more attempts.
And I think that's what sometimes I think players too, particularly in transition, but also in half court, they think of the 3 as the best shot, whereas the layup will always remain the best shot in basketball. And I think free throws being second, I think sometimes we get it that like inverted thinking, like particularly in transition where you should be running for layups, you have the guys going for the home run 3 a lot. I think what Denver is willing to do from a cutting standpoint, obviously Jokic is, the great passing makes it easier. But I loved how Christian Brown took 1 3 last night and he knocked it off the side of the backboard.
I was going to say, well, it wasn't pretty.
If he tried to play a spot up game, he would be a liability. but because he has great energy and he has tenacity and he's willing to cut and move and he has a sense of timing, he was so important to them last night. Aaron Gordon, if he was spotting up and just being a stationary type player, no, he doesn't do that. He does it because he gets rewarded. Obviously, Jokic is always looking to reward, but I think sometimes we become these stationary players, and I think it's easier to guard. I think every player has to figure out, particularly the ones that aren't just gifted off the dribble, how can I get layups and how can I get to the free throw line? Duncan Robinson in game 2 showed an improvement putting it down the ground, okay, on a hard closeout, the curl on a cut. He's figuring out how to get layups and diversify his offense. And I think everybody's got to think that way. How can I get a layup and how can I get to the free throw line?
Yeah, a couple of things. Christian Brown, the blitzes kind of unnerved Denver for a minute, and you could see them within the game kind of figuring out ways around it. And one of them was, he just positioned himself as a release valve a couple of times when there were 2 on the ball with Murray, and maybe the pass to Jokic wasn't there. Once he popped up on the wing, once he cut into the baseline kind of in an open area, and Jamal Murray hit him directly, skipping Jokic just hit him. I thought that was really good. And then they started doing the screener play where, okay, Bam, if you want to blitz, we're going to hit you with a pick on the way up to the pick and roll and put you behind the play. So they're going to start to figure some of those things out. And Aaron Gordon, I thought Denver came out with a very, and this is hard to do. Miami has 23 turnovers in 3 games. I mean, that's an unthinkably low number. They are getting shots on goal. That's one of their ideologies. You hear Spo say it. It's hard to run when you get no turnovers. And Denver last night, I thought, made a concerted effort. Anytime you miss at the rim, we are going as fast as we can. Bam, I think Butler threw a lob to Bam that Bam couldn't quite reach. He leaps 40, falls over. Bruce Brown gets a 5-on-4 3. Jokic is pushing every time. And there was one play you mentioned, and they got some of these Aaron Gordon buckets from game 1 that they didn't have in game 2, where Jokic kind of brought it up pretty fast. And Aaron Gordon was ahead of Jimmy Butler and just kind of sealed him. We normally think of guys sealing guys under the rim with their back to the basket. He sealed Jimmy Butler up at the foul line with Jimmy Butler's body between him and midcourt, and Jokic just kind of led him for a layup. I thought their pace last night, which Michael Malone talked about, was they were urgent with it. They made a real effort to do it against a team that's not giving them any easy chances to do it.
I thought Aaron Gordon, I know people would talk about his start of game 1, and that was important. I thought last night was his best overall game. I thought his rebounding in traffic and his bust out dribbles led to really good stuff. He found Jokic on a deep duck in transition. He got his own dunk once. He made harder plays when the ball was in the air and then turned them into tangible offense. I thought he was really, really good last night.
Miami 11 of 35 from 3, and they missed some good ones. Like Gabe Vincent had a good one in the corner on an out of bounds play. Kyle Lowry missed a couple open pull-ups where the Nuggets kind of got hung up on screens. They'll shoot better in game 4, hopefully. Denver's defense, though, I thought, and Aaron Gordon's in particular, Jimmy Butler tried to fool him a couple times by rejecting screens, and he read it like as if he knew it were coming. What stood out to you about Denver's defense? How did they pull off this 35% shooting at the rim? I mean, I thought Jokic's rim defense was good. He had 2 blocks. Bruce Brown was credited for 3 blocks that were kind of like half blocks, half strips on shots around the basket. For a team that's not known as a defensive team, what did they do to Miami last night?
Yeah, I thought they were good. They if you take away the mistakes and just make people beat you over the top, you have a good chance of playing good enough defense to win. And I thought Miami got great things when Jimmy Butler had a matchup either initially in transition or after a screen by a small that got him with anybody but Gordon on him. I thought he really did a good job in attacking every other matchup. I thought he missed some. I think he was 6 for 16 at half, something like that. I thought he had great opportunities in the first half that he didn't cash in at the high percentage that you would expect. So I think they can go to that more. But I just think Denver did a much better job eliminating, blatant mistakes. If you don't get beat in transition and then you don't make, bad mistakes, they have such good overall size that it becomes hard, even if they're not the most vertical team, to go up and block shots or anything like that. Because to me, Adebayo struggled last night to score. Like, I'm so impressed, first of all, with Adebayo. Like,
Oh my God. To
how
get
hard he plays, screening, passing, and he had good opportunities, and he missed. And I think, Butler and he, if they get the same shots, they'll do better. And I think you look at the combination of Strus, Vincent, after playing, getting him off to a great start in game 2, Strus did, and then Vincent was such a great, he played so well, in that second half with Robinson. Like, they didn't get a big contribution from any of those guys last night. So, yeah, I think they'll play better, and I think there's some things that they can go to. But if Denver doesn't make blatant mistakes like they did in game 2, their size could still win out.
Yeah, I thought Butler finished with 28 on 11 of 24. 4 assists is the number that stood out to me. I thought Denver was a little bit more careful with when they helped and where they helped from, both when he was going one-on-one against Murray and Caldwell Pope. He's also bullying too. And on the pick and roll, I thought they were, instead of, if we're dropping back on Jimmy, instead of bringing that third guy all the way in every single time, we're going to try to play 2-on-2 or like 2.5-on-2 and make those kick out reads a little harder. Jokic had a block on Butler at the rim. Maybe it was on Bam on a pocket pass. I can't remember. On a play that he played 2-on-2, basically a pick and roll. He played 2-on-2. And then Vincent and Strus, 3 of 17. Duncan Robinson had a couple of threes late that didn't add up to much. What did you make of it's always curious to me when Miami, and they did it when they were behind substantially in the fourth quarter, goes with the lineup that has no Strus and no Robinson, like neither of their ace shooters. So it's Lowry, Vincent, Butler, Martin, Bam. I always think I guess Spo is thinking, let's just go all defense and see if we can get back into the game that way. I do. That lineup's interesting to me, and it's also interesting that we have not seen like the Butler, Martin, Love, Bam, super big lineup that maybe they just think is too slow. But what do you make of that, like, no Strus, no Robinson look?
Well, I thought for a time there that lineup has the ability to really extend the floor. The physicality is tremendous, and the quickness and speed. Again, Miami is not the most gifted offensive team. And so I think they're searching each and every night, how can we keep our defensive integrity while still having enough offense on the floor? And I thought, again, I thought Martin looked better last night than he did in the first 2 games. They just got absolutely pummeled in the paint, pummeled on the backboard. And, there's a lot of things that go into why that happened. But at the end of the day, the size of Denver, to me, showed up and showed out and was the absolute difference in the game. They're just big. And I think Miami, like Adebayo, what's he, 6'8", 6'9", whatever he is?
6'9".
Yeah, he's fighting as hard as he can, but Jokic's size advantage. And then you go Gordon and Porter Jr., all the way through. I just think their overall size won out last night.
The tracking numbers on Second Spectrum seem a little wonky to me. This morning, I think there's something off in Denver's scoring against the Heat zone. It only lists them right now as facing one possession of zone defense, which is obviously wrong. Something happened there. But to my eyes, that was Denver's best game against the zone. What did you think and what did you see? I don't have the numbers, but it seemed to me they were comfortable against the zone, and Miami kind of came out of it a little earlier than you would think.
Well, I thought they ran more. They ran a couple different actions that just took Jokic and didn't put him in the high post area. They got him in the low post one time against the zone. That's where Christian Brown had one of his cuts and finishes. I think they moved Jokic, or Jokic moved himself, however it worked, to different spots on the floor. And then I thought they were more active in the cutting game once the ball found Jokic. So I agree with you. I thought they played very well, very comfortably. And obviously, Miami wasn't in zone as much, but you're right. I mean, they were in it, I'm going to say 10, 12 times for sure.
I was going to guess like a dozen times. What else can Miami do to win game 4 other than just make more threes? What adjustments are there? What did you see out there? What else is there for them to do?
I think when they blitz Murray, I wouldn't stay on the blitz as long as they did last night. I would blitz hard for a slide and a half, and then get back, so we're not stretched out as long. I think that's one thing defensively that they could go to. But I would blitz Murray at the start to try to negate his initial aggression. I think you keep attacking Porter Jr. when you can. I
think they should do that more. I think they didn't go at him enough last night.
They got off, Strus made some good plays early, passes. He had I think 4 assists early in the game. I think getting Gordon off of Butler as early in the shot clock as possible will produce good shots. And I think Adebayo, again, he's taken 20 shots in a game. He needs to. I think his night started with a really good initial move on the first possession of the game, and he missed an easy reverse layup. But I think he's got to keep going at Jokic off the dribble. To me, they've got to shoot better. Certainly, they've got to get. I think Vincent was troubled by the early foul trouble, never found a good rhythm. Somebody's going to have to step forth and make 3-4 threes. But I think it comes down to the Riley, no rebounds, no rings. You're not winning games. You lose, getting out rebounded by 25. You're just not, and you can't get pummeled in the paint. The game in the paint is more consistent than the 3-point game. So they're going to have to figure out how they can stand firmer in the paint and on the board. But there are some things offensively that I think they can do and did last night to get good shots. And I think they've got to continue to exploit those. Yeah,
it's interesting you mentioned Strus and Strus's playmaking, because I kind of thought, I've talked a lot about how they have to get Jokic moving from the paint to the arc and back on the same possession. I call it the Jokic yo-yo. Get him dropping back against Butler and then pivot into a Bam 2-man game with Strus or Robinson, and you've got to get back up and he's got to chase, and then the pocket pass is there. I thought they lost that thread of their offense a little bit in the second half, and they can get a little more out of that. Porter, I want to talk about Porter. So they run the first play of the game for Michael Porter Jr. Clearly, Michael Malone said, we're going to try and get you going. Pin down for Michael Porter Jr. He misses. He finishes 1 of 7, 2 points. This is a guy who's averaged 20 a game in the NBA for long periods of time. 2 points. He's had a miserable series. Plays 21 minutes. They close with their Bruce Brown, all defense, and Jokic and Murray lineup. And yet, and he was the subject of much criticism coming out of game 2. And yet there were a couple of plays, one of which you called out right on the broadcast, where he got switched on to Jimmy Butler in the third or fourth quarter. I can't remember which. Nice rear view contest on a Butler long 2. And then later, somebody missed, and he just went right around Strus for a monster offensive rebound, missed the putback, and I think it ended with a Jokic putback. It was like a tip parade, and Jokic put it in. And those 2 plays, like, those are winning effort plays, and they made me hopeful for Michael Porter Jr.'s sake that he might have a game yet in him in the series, because his offense isn't going. His minutes are down. He's a young player. He was a little sulky in game 2, and he could have got super sulky last night. And those couple of plays he made, I was like, his head is still in this series. And if he keeps his head in this series and it goes long enough, he is going to have a game when the threes fall for him. I thought those plays, they just kind of wormed their way into my brain.
Well, that's how you work your way out of any offensive struggle, is to get out of yourself, get back into the team, and make plays that require effort and energy. And he had, I love the offensive rebound sequence that you talked about. I think Mark, I don't think Mark agrees with me, but when Gordon rests, when Butler's in, I'd rather have Porter Jr. on him with size than the smaller, more acclaimed other Nugget defenders. I just think size on Butler is more impactful than, speed and lateral quickness. And so I think if Porter Jr., look, I think some of his issues defensively are effort, but they're also body type. He's this really, I mean, he must be 6'11". He must be almost 7 feet. He's so big.
I think he's listed at 6'10", but he's a huge.
I mean, he's huge. It's hard getting down and negotiating these screens. And oftentimes on these screens, he's so far behind the guy he's guarding at the point of the screen that they're almost forced into. And Jokic early on some of these Strus passes had to hold so long on Strus. And I think sometimes Porter Jr. should just veer back to the guy who screened him, because his size does give him the ability to hold his ground against like a Bam Adebayo. And I liked him on Butler. But I just think, make these effort plays and your offense will find itself. He's too good a shooter if he's in the right frame of mind and he's getting into the game from an effort standpoint to continue to miss.
Yeah, I find those minutes when Butler is on the floor and Gordon is on the bench to be really interesting. Going into the series, I wondered if they would just try to play Gordon every minute that Butler is on the floor. And then you think, well, I mean, Butler is one of those players who's going to play 45 minutes, 42 minutes, whatever it is in the biggest games. And Aaron Gordon, they have guys who are good off the bench who generally kind of take little bites of Aaron Gordon's minutes. He's not a 45-minute a game player. I still wonder that those minutes from a Nuggets perspective, like when I see Jeff Green on Jimmy Butler, and Jeff Green's having an okay series, I'm like, ooh, that doesn't seem like a great matchup. And the same, what do you think of? Should Spo just have Bam out there every minute Jokic is out there? And that's a harder question, I think, than people realize, because Jokic plays the whole first quarter and the whole third quarter, and Jimmy Butler likes to play the whole first quarter and the whole third quarter. So if Bam is also playing the whole first quarter and the whole third quarter, you've got to either rest Butler at a different place, or you're going to end up resting them both together at some point. Maybe. I mean, but the minutes with Zeller have not been good.
No, but last night he actually held up much better than he did out in Denver. He got the charge call last night. I thought he held up better last night. But again, if Jokic and Murray are basically playing the whole game,
yeah,
I think it's really hard. I mean, particularly if they're rolling like they were last night. I mean, the conditioning it takes to play 45 minutes hard where the ball's in your hand and you're having to create plays like and then guard, particularly like a perimeter player like Murray. That was phenomenal conditioning. And so then you go to Adebayo, like you think about him blitzing pick and rolls, being undersized in comparison to Jokic, being really the only player of size on the floor oftentimes, to having to try to, rebound the ball in traffic, create plays, shoot jump shots. I mean, there has to be some minutes where he can rest, but when you look at how the games have gone, he's going to probably have to play, um, 42 plus every night. And this is, game 4 is the last time there's the only time there's one day between game. Every other game in this series, there's 2 game days in between. So I think that plays to both teams because both teams really right now, Miami plays more guys, but the 2 main guys for both teams are going to play huge minutes. I'm interested to see if Miami goes to someone other than Zeller. I don't see how they could right now.
That's part of the drama of the finals as just a fan of these games is, as a coach, you have to look into the eyes of your best players and say, can you give me 47 minutes? Can you give me another? I mean, like you probably remember conversations like that, looking at, whether it was Ewing or Allen Houston or somebody and saying, how do you have any more for me? Right.
Well, yeah. And I think back then, again, I just remember like, when the finals that we were in 99, this is pre-load management days for San Antonio, who started it. Like, I would have loved if Tim Duncan had played like, 34 minutes a game, but he was playing like 45 minutes a game. And like at those moments, I think that's why people try to manage minutes throughout the course of the season. So if you're fortunate enough to get to where Miami and Denver is right now, you can play as many minutes as necessary. And I think, as necessary last night was 44 and 45 for Denver. They knew, especially going into the fourth quarter. We've tried the rest. We've played 2 lousy fourth quarters. If we're going to play a third lousy fourth quarter, it's going to be because our best players were on the floor and they were too tired. But we're not trying to get them, 2-3 minutes rest and then we, lose the cushion that we built up. So I think every game is different, but I wouldn't suspect much would be different minute wise with the 2 stars for Denver.
We saw a couple hard double teams on Jokic post-ups last night. Miami's really trying to stay home on the shooters when Jokic is posting up. First of all, they're trying to get him to not be able to post up by fronting him all the time. We saw him seal Bam for a lob, like post up at the elbow almost and get a lob. That he just missed a chippy out of that. But we did see a couple hard double teams, one of which resulted in Murray getting that 1 pass away 3. The nearest guy, they're trying to help off the nearest guy and get right back to him and not help off anybody else. And I highlighted a possession in game 2 when Butler did that off of Murray. Jokic kicked it to him, and the pass was like low into the left, and Murray couldn't get an open 3 off. He had to repost it, and Bam, of course, was already fronting because Bam's an animal. Then, and I said, it's like, that's the margin, like inches. That's the margin. And last night, that pass was on target, and he got what might be the first like easy 1 pass away 3 they've gotten the entire series. And Lowry got a strip on another hard double team. Kyle Lowry, that dude's hands must be made of like, I don't even know, like whatever Wolverine is made of, I don't know, whatever Wolverine is made of in the X-Men.
He's got such great anticipation, such strong hands, and he'll put his body into the play. And, again, my term is contact plays, whatever anybody else, he's not avoiding. He's inserting himself into the mix, and he does it with intelligence, toughness, and like you said, tremendous anticipation and use of his hands. Really hard to do.
He's a great screener, and I thought they missed some not opportunities, but there were good plays where he screened for Butler last night when he had Murray on him, and he would flip the angle of the screen, and like Jimmy went kind of the way that Aaron Gordon expected him to. So Denver shut that off, but I like him screening for Butler, and vice versa, really, because they can go under sometimes on Butler when he's the ball handler. But Kyle Lowry is just an awesome screener, and I think there are little bits of profit for them to get going there too.
I agree. I thought they did a good job. Again, I think Butler, if you look at the quality of his shot, he took 4 threes. He made one versus an Aaron Gordon going under a pick and roll. But the other shots he got, I thought he could have easily had, instead of 11 for 24, to me, he could have had 14 for 24, 15 for 24. I thought he, because of those screens and other people, other small guys setting screens, forcing switches, and then him having advantageous matchups, I thought he could have had, he had 28, but I thought he could have had, a 40-point game. I thought that was the quality of shot he got. And if they're able to do that again, I think that's really good offense for him.
And I got to say, every time a team goes under a screen against Butler, the same thing goes on in my brain in real time, every single possession. Oh, that's really smart. They're mixing in. They're going under on Jimmy Butler. I like, oh, he just made a 3-pointer. Like he just every time they do it, he punishes them. And I know you got to go. I just want to highlight one defensive possession that.
Can I say one last thing on that?
Yes, absolutely.
Bam Adebayo as a screener is so good. Like, I don't know what the legality of his screens are, but these are full body. Like, I'm taking you out of the play. You try to go under against a lot of guys, you can go under, and guys aren't impacted. Bam Adebayo, like, he's cleaning you up. Like, this guy gets people more space, and I don't know how you could chart this, but to me, he gets guys more space, more separation than an average screener. This guy, like we talk about making guys better with passes, this guy makes guys better because of his willingness to screen on an every night basis. It is impressive.
Coach, on this podcast, I have pitched already the last week that part of the NBA's media training should be at Summer League. We all have to try to get around a Bam Adebayo screen against like a good NBA, like bring Gabe Vincent into Summer League. We all have to try see how that feels, because it doesn't feel good. And if you try to get under it, they're gonna win the race to the other side because you're gonna get hung up. You're not getting clean under that thing.
No, he's not allowing that. Like I watch. I mean, it's really impressive.
If people want to see a really good Denver defensive possession and how they were locked in last night, about 2:15 left in the third quarter, Kyle Lowry, Bam, pick and roll. Christian Brown is on Lowry. 3 Heat players are spaced to the right side. The other 3 guys are all bunched up together. Christian Brown chases over the screen. A+. Jokic drops back. Solid. Bam's rolling. Bruce Brown, because the other 3 guys are all bunched up, says, I can come in and help a little bit here. My other 2 guys can take these 3 guys. They're close together. Comes in and helps off of, I want to say, Caleb Martin. Kyle Lowry sees that, kicks the ball to Caleb Martin. Kyle Lowry's like right under the rim when he makes this pass. Bruce Brown flies out with the ball, runs Caleb Martin off the line. Caleb Martin beats him off the dribble. Who does he run right into? Christian Brown, who's in there because Kyle Lowry was in the paint. Kyle Lowry's going back out to the arc. Bruce Brown reads that right away. So, okay, I'm switching on to Kyle Lowry. Possession dies out. Denver was like dialed in last night on defense. And when they're dialed in on defense, I mean, I picked Nuggets in 6. I just think they're a little bit better than Miami. And game 4, obviously, Coach, it's a must win for Miami. They're not going to beat Denver 3 times in a row. They're not going to beat them twice at home. I don't think. You're laughing at me. Is it not a must win?
No, it is. I'm laughing because, like, when we talk in the playoffs, like it's important for Miami, but like you said earlier, like it's also important for Denver. I mean, it's not about getting home court advantage. It's about like not being softened by the win last night. If you're Denver, like, no, like we have to come out. You cannot mess around. Like, it's just, they are a little bit better, but they're not so much better that they can be assured like, hey, if we turn it into a 3-game series, we got 2 at home, it'll take care of itself. We've all seen the pressure that mounts on Game 5 home teams, and it's hard. And so then if you're not successful there, you're going back to Miami, Game 6. Like, so, they're all important. Obviously, it's, in this case, you would say it's more important for Miami, but I think that's a dangerous mentality. If you're Denver, you have to conjure up in your mind that this game is more important to us, or as important to us.
You're right. You're playing for the championship. Like every game, every inch you get there matters. Miami wins tomorrow. It's 2-2. They've beat Milwaukee. They beat Boston. One team has won in Denver in the playoffs. One. It's them. They don't care. They don't care that they lost by 15. It's already out of their brains. They're going to come back and they're going to pound you and pound you and pound you, because that's what the Heat do. So I can't wait for Game 4. Jeff Van Gundy, you'll be on the call with our friends Mike Breen and Mark Jackson. Thank you for your time, sir.
You got it. Have a great day.
I want to understand what the hell is going on with Chris Paul. So there's nobody better to do that with than resident cap expert, Florida man, Bobby Marks. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Zach. How are you?
Good. I just had Van Gundy on to talk about the finals, and I mentioned all these Miami Heat lineups and machinations and adjustments, and I forgot to mention Tyler Hero, before we start with the Chris Paul madness, I just wanted to acknowledge Tyler Hero and the possibility that he might return. And last night felt like a game where I've said before that the Heat could use his pull-up jump shooting in short spurts here and there. I wouldn't overdo it, but he told our Raz Golden-Wude that he's still experiencing soreness. That was in Game 2 in his hands. So I just wanted to at least, remember that Tyler Hero exists as a potential wild card here as the Heat try to even up the series or get into the series or whatever. But the longer it goes, the more it feels like, is this just going to not happen with Tyler Hero? Is it just a next year thing? We'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially if they don't get Game 4, I mean, this thing could be over by Monday, right? I mean, that's kind of the reality of it. I think if certainly if they even it out, we might see him here. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly parts of Game 3, and I thought Game 1. I think we forget how good of a rebounder he is too, with his size. Even if he's not out there making shots, just to gives you another body with. If your lineup is struggling with the Strus, Vincent, Martin, Duncan Robinson group out there, bigger defender. So we'll see if he's out there. But as I said, if this thing goes back to Denver 3-1, I don't like the chances of seeing Tyler Hero out there.
So I am in the NBA Finals bunker, and I don't like to come out of the NBA Finals bunker, Bobby, because the NBA Finals, this is the whole reason we do this. All this nonsense, all the drafts and the undrafted free agents and the trade rumors and all that, it's all to get here. So I'm in my bunker. I'm watching every game like 3 times. I'm talking to people. I don't like to come out of my finals bunker. I certainly don't like to come out of it to talk about the top of the 2019 draft class and whatever the hell I have missed that is going on there.
Yeah, that's more for a That's
Nope.
more for the night crowd, the after the 10 p.m. and above, when put your kids away to bed crowd.
Truthfully, people aren't going to believe the degree to which I'm in the bunker. You all had to explain to me what I have missed in the last 36 hours. And I was, Dan, my producer, Andrea, the video producer, you can all attest to it. I was like, what's happening? So we're going to table that one for a different day. Maybe I can resurrect the Drinking Vegas podcast that I used to do with Howard Beck and Rachel Nichols. Maybe I can resurrect that, and it feels appropriate for that. Anyway, what the hell is going on with Chris Paul? So Chris Paul has not been waived. He is still a member of the Phoenix Suns. He is still under a contract that pays him $30.8 million in this coming season, about 15.8 of which is guaranteed. And then 30 the next season, none of which is guaranteed. So let's just erase that. He's on a $30.8 million expiring deal. Has not been waived. The deal becomes fully guaranteed, I believe, on June 28th. So that's when the 30.8, it's locked in, blah, blah, blah. Then so he's not waived. Hasn't been waived. Don't waive. Woj reports yesterday that there have been discussions with Chris Paul's representatives and the Phoenix Suns about his future with the Phoenix Suns, a future that could include him being waived, could involve him being waived with the stretch provision, which would allow them to stretch that $15.8 million over, I believe, 3 seasons. So 5 and change
5
each
seasons.
5? Oh, because it's 2. That's right. The second season.
Yes.
So it's 3 and change each one. But if you stretch him, you can't re-sign him. If you waive him, just outright pay him all the money, and he clears waivers, you can re-sign him, which feels to me like it should be illegal. It shouldn't be allowed. Why is it allowed? Why am I thinking of Zydrunas Ilgauskas when this comes up? Like, why is that okay to do that?
That's different. And that's different. That was the Zydrunas Ilgauskas was that he was what was he traded and then they waived him and then he re-signed, right? Like that was that rule as far as you can't Chris Paul cannot get traded to Atlanta. The Hawks waive him and then Phoenix re-sign. That is not allowed.
Shouldn't be allowed for the Suns to waive Chris Paul, pay him $15.8 million, and then re-sign him for some much lower amount. Although he's getting all the money either way. So it just feels like feels a little just like, I don't know, weird. Feels weird. But so let's go through the options. What is actually going on here? How about we start there? What's going on?
Yeah, I mean, I think what was reported was that there was a meeting between Chris Paul and his representatives and the Suns, and basically they kind of outlined what the offseason is going to look out for the perspective of, you've got Kevin Durant, you've got DeAndre Ayton, you've got Devin Booker, guys making 30 million plus. Chris Paul would be the 4th guy there, right? So in reality, how this roster is constructed, it's not really feasible to bring back these 4 players. And then, I mean, it is feasible, but basically your options are limited. You're basically filling it out with all players to the veteran minimum exception, right? Like that's the reality of the situation here. Phoenix does not have to do anything until June 28th, which I don't think they will, because that will be post-draft in case a trade happens here. When you look at it from the Suns' perspective, you kind of laid it out. There are basically 2 different options here if there's no trade in place, right? You can waive him, incur the $15.8 million cap hit, and then that basically leaves you with the $5 million tax mid-level exception, okay? I went through the numbers last night, and then basically you're filling out the roster with players signed to the veteran minimum exception. That's the reality of it. And that still puts you over the luxury tax, right? Sets you below that first apron number, but below the luxury tax. You can stretch them. So basically you're taking that $15.8 million number and you're stretching it over 5 years. It's a $3.2 million cap hit. You will not be allowed to re-sign him. That's part of the rules. And that gives you access to the bigger exception, your $12.2 million non-tax mid-level exception, to go out and split it up among however many players you want to do, 2 players, 3 players, maybe it's 1 player here, but you're still faced with the situation where most of your roster in free agency is still going to be signed with players signed to the veteran minimum exception here. So that's kind of the 2 different options. Certainly the first option, where you're basically taking on that big cap hit, you can re-sign Chris Paul, right? Like you can sign him to the veteran minimum exception if that's what he wants to do. It's like $3 million to bring him back and then use that smaller exception on somebody else.
I don't think he wants to come back for the minimum, because I think if he would, I think that's what would be happening. So I took this as they met. The meeting does not appear to have gone well. and um and Chris, here are your options. We can waive you and re-sign you at X number, whatever number that might be. We can stretch you and say goodbye. Or, we could keep you for $30.8 million, but that's going to take us right up to the second apron. Once we fill up our roster, we're not going to have any exceptions, either the big or the small mid-level exception, because we're going to have too much money. And so our team is going to be problematic to build. So this is the reality staring us in the face. Is there any way this is just a game of chicken about how much money they'll re-sign Chris Paul for after waiving him? Or is this like, what is the end game here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about a game of chick. I mean, at the end of the day, this was coming, right? I mean, why it happened, the first week of, I guess, of June. I think it's more that they just had this meeting, and based on, where their finances are, like, this was coming. The only way I saw Chris Paul's contract being guaranteed at that full number was for them to use him in a trade, right? For them to use him in a trade and see if you can go out and split that up into 2 players or 3 players and balance out your roster here. I never thought that.
But here's the thing about the trade, though. If I'm taking his $30.8 million and I'm trading for whatever players that make either one or multiple up to that number, near that number, I'm not solving the financial constraint thing.
No.
That I guess I am, in that I'm turning him into 3 players. And so I don't care if I don't have the exceptions that you're talking about. Maybe that's all there is. I haven't found a great Chris Paul trade of that ilk. I only have really one or two suggestions.
No, either have I. And I think now that it's out that the likelihood is that they're waiving him, now you have teams saying, well, wait a minute, I can maybe possibly sign him to maybe one of our exceptions, or maybe he comes to the Clippers for the veteran minimum. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, the big picture is Chris Paul's made $376 million in his career, right? So is he at a point where he's looking for the 12.2 non-tax mid-level? I mean, I think you also have to remember that there's a set off in the contract too. So, like, it's not like Chris Paul is going to get the 15.8 and then go sign somewhere for 14 million and get both. Like, there's a reduction and as far as what Phoenix would owe him there. So no, I haven't found a good trade. I think, if you're Phoenix, you're doing your due diligence. You're seeing maybe something happens around the draft, unlikely here. And then you probably go in the course of waiving him. And then it's a matter of if his contract is stretched. I think certainly DeAndre Ayton, which mentioned it in the article, DeAndre Ayton certainly could be in play. Maybe that opens up some more flexibility for you as far as breaking up that contract. But the likelihood, I would say, is that Chris Paul is probably not on the Suns roster, that he is stretched, that they do go out there operating as a team with that 12.2 non-tax mid-level exception. And then now if it's where does he go, right? Like, that's going to be the next thing. Like, him on the veteran minimum, that's a great value contract, right? Him at the $5 million tax mid-level is a great value contract.
Who are the good teams that would have the full mid-level to throw at him, that actually need a point guard?
I think the Lakers certainly, right?
That's the one, right?
Yeah, that it comes down to the Lakers, really, because if how we've talked about it in the past, where if they, with Rui and Austin Reeves, and they're going to operate as a team basically kind of over the cap, they would still have that non-tax mid-level, and they would still have the flexibility to sign those 2 players, go out and get Chris Paul. I think they would still have some wiggle room to stay below the luxury tax here. That's and keep Jared Vanderbilt. That's your best probably as far as a team with that full non-tax mid-level. I mean, the other teams, are, the Clevelands of the world, the Sacramentos of the world, teams that he would probably have to go as a backup to. But I think he can roll with the Lakers and, certainly be their starter. Clippers only have the veteran minimum because where they are with finances. Same with, Boston would only have I heard the Celtics name mentioned this morning, just perusing through TV, they only have the veteran minimum because of the whole Grant Williams situation here. So it really kind of comes down to the Lakers if he's looking to try to make the most money in his next contract.
Yeah, the Lakers make a ton of sense because, I do think they have some interest in bringing D'Angelo Russell back. But if this were to present itself as a cheaper and shorter term alternative, that I think that makes a lot. Chris Paul's just better than D'Angelo Russell. Here's the thing: Chris Paul's still good. Like, this feels kind of bad for Phoenix that just traded Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson and 4 first-round picks and a swap and Jay Crowder, who wasn't playing, was there, for Kevin Durant. And I think part of the idea of that trade was Chris Paul plus Devin Booker plus Kevin Durant plus DeAndre Ayton. And we're talking about turning Chris Paul into an exception salary slot, or if you can't trade him, like, that feels like not great for Phoenix. And then you mentioned Ayton. Frank Vogel, I think, was honest when he was talking about how he's excited to connect with Ayton and reinvigorate his career. I don't know how widely that excitement is shared within the Phoenix Suns organization, which has been totally revamped under Matt Ishbia. But, like, this feels like this is a lot of instability to have on your roster after you just made this mega trade. And it feels like they really need a stable year. Like, they didn't get one this year because of Durant's injury and then all the stuff that went bad in the playoffs for them, with Chris getting hurt, DeAndre playing badly and then getting hurt. It feels like you introduce a lot of flux with that kind of trade, but you had this sort of ecosystem that you were counting on with these 4 guys. It doesn't seem great to me that 2 of them are now, like, may not, like, there's some uncertainty about them, and one of them may turn into a cap exception. That seems not great. Like, Chris Paul is an injury risk. He's older, not the same guy, doesn't have the same zip. We all know that. Wasn't great in the playoffs. He's still good.
I think the question for me is, what's the end game, right? What's the end game at point guard? So you waive Chris Paul. You still have Campaign, who's got a partial guarantee. The likelihood is you guarantee him. You go into free agency touting that you've got this $12.2 million exception. Like, who's the guy? Who are the guys, right? Like, you're looking at base. I don't think it's Gabe Vincent. I think Gabe Vincent is probably, I think he's a non-tax 12-2 guy, maybe a little bit more. And I think probably Miami is still the priority for him. But then you're looking at guys like Dennis Schroeder, right? Like, there's a list of those 1 year type guys that can come in here. I think the big question for me, or what I would ask Phoenix is that if this was next year, which is 2024, when these more stringent rules are going to come into place, like, I understand it. Like, I understand why you would cut bait with Chris Paul and go in this direction. I kind of get it this year. The rules are coming into place, and based on where their finances are, they only have the veteran minimum. They don't have a first round pick to go out and fill 7 roster spots there. So I guess that exception is appealing, but you just get lumped with the rest of the teams here in free agency is hard to go out and get one of these, a guy to take a discount at $12 million.
Are Durant and Booker playing like 48 minutes every game? Yeah. Like, what are we doing here? Maybe the end game is, I'm almost afraid. Maybe the end game is, like, do we spin Ayton into a point guard or another ball handler? I don't even want to mention. I barely want to mention the possibility of an Ayton Kyrie centric sign and trade, because I don't know how anybody, and I have no idea if this is this is not.
Well, what happens though is that, what happens with getting rid of Chris Paul now, it gives you more flexibility if you were going to entertain the sign and trade option, right? Like, that gives you the flexibility with his number, whether at 15.8 or whether it be stretched, to be able to stay under that, $170 million threshold, right? That gives you the bigger buffer. Now, the question is, like, well, if it's 8 and like, what else do you got? Like, right? Like that's it.
None of these are great choices, and
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody could have watched that movie in Brooklyn and want to recreate it. But we'll see what happens. I still think Kyrie probably resigns in Dallas just because they'll offer him the most money. But the Clipper, like I thought maybe the Clippers look like a team where they could break it up into smaller contracts, but then it's like, am I getting that? Like, what smaller contracts am I taking back? They're not going to want to trade me Terrence Mann, probably. If I can get Terrence Mann, that's interesting. But like, is Batum plus Covington or Morris plus Batum or Morris, like two of those three guys, like it's not that. Powell plus Batum. I mean, none of that is that exciting to me if I'm the Suns.
No, I mean, that's what you're basically looking at. I mean, as I said, especially knowing that this guy, that he'll be on the waiver wire come, June 28th. I mean, like he would be perfect in San Antonio. I mean, if that's how he wants to finish it, right? I mean, basically kind of, with that group there, but I don't think from a rebuilding standpoint, even with the appeal of Victor and playing for Pop, right? Like that, I don't know if that does it for you, especially as I said, he's made so much money in his career that, he can pick his spot, but it's going to come at a discount right now.
What if Harden leaves Philly?
Yeah, that opens up the non-tax mid-level for them. So they would have that 12-2, they would have that 12-2 number for him to
him and Maxey is just so small. Like it's so small. I don't know. This feels like I get the finances behind it. I get why this was heading here. It just, for it to come out June 7th is strange.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, and so like, that's why, listen, you're 3 weeks away from the deadline, the cut date. Chris Paul yesterday, even though it came out, was not going to hit the waiver wire because it just made 0 sense here. And I think if you're Phoenix, what you're doing is you're doing your due diligence. Who are my guys at the $5 million tax mid-level? Who are my guys at the bigger exception here? And I think that will play a big role because you're doing your back channeling as far as what we can get come free agency. And and that's why
I actually get.
Yeah, and I understand it from Chris's perspective. Like you want some clarity as far as who I mean, like you could go down a list of teams that who has money and who has available exceptions, right? That's the reality of it. And getting waived on June 25th and June 28th, I don't see it as kind of it doesn't move the needle for me.
Did you read anything into Damian Lillard's comments to Brian Custer, who hosts Get Up here and there for Greeny and has his own podcast, The Last Stand, about if he were ever traded, what team would he prefer out of? I think he was asked Miami, New York, Brooklyn, maybe another team. And he said Miami, and then he said Brooklyn because he loves Bam and he loves Mikal Bridges. But he also said he wants to stay in Portland and expects to stay in Portland, which didn't get as much publicity as the other parts.
No, I mean, what I got out of it is that I think as much intrigue that Victor has coming into the draft on the 22nd, it's Portland, I basically have circled as the team to watch, right? For so many different reasons, because as far as whether they stay at 3 or they look to try to upgrade and put other pieces around Lillard here. Like, I think that's like, if they walk out with the 3rd pick, I don't know how that impacts Damian Lillard in a positive when you're rolling into free agency saying we're going to bring back Jeremy Grant, and that's basically it there. What I made of it was that if there ever was a scenario where he becomes in play, it has to be this summer, especially if we're talking about a team like the Heat, right? Because now this is the window when you have a guy making $45-46 million, where the new rules come into play this harder restrictions in 2024, where Miami could potentially become a second apron team or right up against that. Next year, you won't be able to put Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero together, right? Just throwing that out there. Like, this is the summer to go out and, where you can aggregate that type of money here. So I think we'll see where it plays out, but it is interesting that, usually he's pretty coy about it, but where he did start mentioning teams, whether it be Miami and Brooklyn.
Well, he was led there by a specific question.
Yep.
And my read on it was Miami's in the finals.
Yeah.
He has a relationship with Bam. Miami's Miami. Everybody wants to live in Miami.
He was in Brooklyn for the Nets play. He's friends with Mikal Bridges.
So I read that part of it as less I would love to go to Brooklyn, and more I would love if Mikal Bridges were on Portland. And hey, Joe Cronin, how about number 3 plus Simons for Mikal Bridges? Now, I've said before, I'm not sure the Nets would do that. A month at the lottery, I had heard they probably wouldn't do that. I actually think that's a fair-ish offer. I love Mikal Bridges. I know they got offered 4 first-round picks or whatever it was from teams, I think Memphis, for Mikal Bridges. None of those first-round picks are nearly as valuable, even combined maybe, as the number 3 pick in this draft if it ends up being Scoot Henderson, right? I mean, like, that is a massive blue-chip asset.
Well, if you said to me 3 and Shaden Sharp and just fill in the salaries, then that would pique my interest.
I don't think they're trading Sharp.
Yeah.
I think they like Sharp too much. So, but my other point, so that's how I read that. And that's the kind of move I think that Dame would likely want to see if he stays in Portland. There are other guys I'm sure they'll target. Portland has sniffed around Anunoby before. I'm not sure what Toronto is going to do this summer. They don't have a coach yet, for one.
What I think is interesting too, when we're talking about like just hypothetical Portland, like I've read, and Joe Cronin came out and said, like, they owe that Chicago pick, right? That's basically top 14 protected for the foreseeable future. I think it's like the next 5 or 6 years. He's come out and said, like, hey, if there's a deal on the table, I'm willing to basically change that protection to basically fast forward when we can move another first tier.
I reported that at the combine that they will do that if they have to. The thing about Miami is, like, that's cool that Dame said he wants to go there. What? Like, so it's Tyler Hero and how many picks can Miami trade? They owe this 2025 first to Oklahoma City. They can probably trade 3 firsts now, right?
Yeah, they can go 23, which is this year. I think it's like the 18th pick in the draft. And then 27, 29, right? Somewhere like, so probably this year and then +2. They owe that 25 pick to OKC. So they can add another 2.
That's not awesome for Damian Lillard. And I know that Damian Lillard's contract is gigantic and no one quite knows how to value these gigantic Beal Lillard contracts and the ones that will follow them. Particularly as, Dame enters his early and then mid 30s. But this is the greatest Blazer of all time. Like, this is still, when healthy this year, a first team all NBA level player. And now I had him on third team because he missed a lot of games and Portland tanked at the end of the season, but he was that good. He just had the best year of his career. You said Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, and 3 first-round picks. And what's the future of those Miami picks? I mean, the betting against the Heat, betting that you're going to get a Heat like in a situation where they bottom out and you're going to get a great pick, like, that hasn't been a profitable bet to make against the Miami Heat ever. It's similar to the Dragic trade with Phoenix. Like, that stinks.
Yeah. There's no, those picks likely are in the 20s here. Now, if you said to me, Hero, Caleb Martin, whatever, I don't even know if that, appeals to me. I've got
Damian Lillard, man.
I know. They're nice players, but I inherit 4 years and
walk-off playoff shots.
Yeah, I inherit 4 years and $130 million of Tyler Hero's contract. It doesn't move the needle.
I do think all of this shows you. I know that John Hollinger has written about all of these teams that have traded all of their picks and are thus sort of locked out of making moves. I still think this summer is going to be frenetic. I mean, it might not all result in movement, but I think there are enough teams and enough players in situations of instability that stuff is going to happen. And I don't think this Dame stuff is like an accident. I don't think he's publicly commenting on this for no reason or answering these questions. He's very smart. He knows what he's doing. And we haven't even talked about, because I'm in the finals bunker, we haven't even talked about the Wizards, who just overhauled their entire front office. And look, I would bet my last bottom dollar that Michael Winger from the Clippers does not take that job if he is not given carte blanche to do whatever the hell he wants, including with Bradley Beal's cooperation, because he has a no trade clause, somehow trading Bradley Beal. And I would bet not all my dollars, but some of them, that when Michael Winger looks at this franchise, he probably would prefer to take a step backward and get out of this muck that they've been in, playing champions and wannabes of the world. And so that's another situation that, yeah, I know like a lot of teams have traded their picks, but like, I just feel like there's just a lot in the air.
Yeah, I mean, especially I think the approach with the Wizards is that trending water in the deep end at 36 wins is probably not good enough anymore, right? Like, and he's been pretty open.
What a bold stance that is, by the way.
treading water in the deep end.
Let's try not to win 36 games next year. Can we do? Can I become a GM? Hey Zach, what would you do with the Wizards? So I think it sucks that we're 10th in the East every year. Can I change that? I think that's a bad Ted. I think that's a bad plan. Your fans don't seem to like it. Our pink jerseys are awesome, but like here's my PowerPoint presentation, just one slide. Don't do this anymore.
The winning the going 10-5 to start the season, and then basically kind of the wheels fall off. The pattern that's not appealing anymore. I mean, so I think, yeah, they don't go in there.
A single Wizards fan that's happy? Have you ever met a happy Wizards fan other than that one playoff run, a couple of playoff runs with John Wall and Bradley Beal? Have you ever met a Wizards fan who's like, man, can't wait for next season?
No, and I would say the consensus would be, if you told Wizards fans you're going to experience extreme pain for 3 years, but on the other end of the rainbow, this is what's going to be here for you, I think they would all sign up. They would all sign up for it.
Anyway, a lot of fun stuff this summer, I think. A lot of fun stuff. We'll see what actually happens, because Hollinger is right. A lot of these teams are locked in, but I still think there's enough. I think some of those teams that are locked in are also maybe motivated to move their own guys in some cases to recoup some picks, but we'll talk about that another day. Is there anything we haven't hit about Chris Paul that you wanted to hit, Bobby, or any of these other things?
No, I mean, we're just let's get through the finals. We'll get through the draft. And then, usually that last week of free agency is when we see some fireworks here. So I wasn't expecting it on July or June.
I don't like to be pulled out of my finals bunker.
I don't.
I
went for a walk and I came back and I had 9 messages. I said, what happened?
I was getting ready for game 3. I was very excited for game 3. Yeah. Really, really excited. I'm not in Miami. I came back after the Denver games, and I'm going to go back to Denver for game 5. But I was very, very excited for game 3. I did not want to be on the phone with league insiders about what in the hell is going on here. I want to concentrate on the game. Who'd you pick in the finals?
I picked Miami in 6.
Oh, spicy.
I did. It's a dumb pick, though.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
No, I mean,
good, man.
I mean, listen. What I saw from Denver last night, I mean, and you've done a podcast on that, right? Like, I just thought there was so much fight from them. I like when Aaron Gordon is basically trying to put his guy into the stanchion bag, posting him up. And I mentioned it in the fourth quarter, like the Christian Brown minutes, right? Like, and I wrote about it, and the Denver article will come out eventually here. Like, what you have for teams that spend, right? And Denver is up there with Jokic, Murray, Porter, Gordon, KCP, $150 million to commit, second apron, whatever, first apron, high spenders. Those type of players become so valuable to you. The guys that you draft with the 22nd pick that can come in, a 3-year guy or a 4-year guy that played at Kansas, won a championship, that you can just plug in here. And I think that's going to be, for me, it's going to be extremely intriguing when we get to the draft, when you see a lot of those high spending teams, whether it be Miami, whether it be Golden State, whether it be the Clippers at 30, do they go out and pick, kids who have been at school for 3 years and have been there, and that you can put them in right away here. So that was kind of like my little, besides everything else with Jokic and Murray last night, that, my takeaway from last night.
Hey man, Christian Brown was out of the rotation for a lot of the year. I think a lot of people in that front office wanted him to be in the rotation for a lot of the time he was out of it. Dude was the third leading scorer on a team that won game 3 of the NBA Finals last night. 7 of 8, 15 points. And I'll tell you, you spend 1 minute around anybody from the Nuggets, and I was just in Denver for a week, they can't stop talking about Peyton Watson.
Yeah.
They are so excited about Peyton Watson and what he might be on their team next year. To your point about trying to get value, I believe he was the 30th pick in last year's draft. They are really, really excited about him. Obviously, he's not in the rotation now, but just someone to keep an eye on. I picked Nuggets in 6. I feel pretty good about that, but I can't wait for game 4. I'm so excited we only have 1 day off to game 4's tomorrow. Bobby Marks, just the best. I'm sorry you got pulled out of your finals bunker.
No, I'm in draft mode bunker.
Okay.
That's what
Draft's
I'm in.
in 2 weeks from today, right?
2 weeks from today.
My God.
So it's going to be the year. It's going to be the draft of the French.
Is Charlotte really taking the Miller kid over Scoot?
Well, I mean, I think I think there has to be separation between him and Scoot, right? Like, I mean, Scoot playing with Ball, Scoot playing with Lillard, doesn't bother me here. I think if there's enough separation where they feel like he's better, then he goes at 2. But I think we could be in a position, and we'll talk about more, that we could have like 4 French kids taken in the first round this year.
Oh,
yes. Getting ready for those Olympics.
They have become a basketball powerhouse, France. I mean, they always do well in all the international competitions. Serbia, who I think has the second best set of talent on paper, they have actually done quite well. It's just the last couple they haven't done as well. But Spain and France just bring it every time, and France has a lot of young talent, obviously highlighted by Wembanyama. All right, Bobby, I'll see you. Are you going to be at the draft?
I'll be up I'll be in Brooklyn that week of the draft week, and then straight to Bristol for free agency.
Oh boy, the Brooklyn Bristol double. All right, well, I'll see you in Brooklyn. Bobby Marks, thank you, sir.
Thank you, buddy.